we're good to go. Welcome, everyone. Lovely to see you here this evening, and hello to everyone who's joining us online. So this is apparently being filmed, and people are also joining us online. Thank you very much to RIM for hosting us. Anyone else who thought it was interesting to come somewhere with forklifts, I thought I wasn't in the right place. So I'm happy to now be here in the beautiful loft. It feels very tech. Now, I'm Darian McBain. I'm the CEO of Outsourced Chief Sustainability Officer Asia, but I was introduced to the ESG tech scene when I worked for the Monetary Authority of Singapore. So I worked for them as the first Chief Sustainability Officer, and I worked a lot with the Green FinTech Office and looking at how FinTech was being applied to green and sustainability issues. And one of the things I was doing was trying to help Singapore become a hub for sustainable finance. And of course, we know that technology has a big role to play there. So I'm really happy to be here this evening to talk about how technology is going to aid sustainability. I think there's a lot of discussion that's coming up around governance, around how you manage risks, AI, and whether ChatGPT is going to take over the world. So I think we're going to have a great discussion this evening. We've got around 45 minutes with my excellent panelists here, and then we've got time for questions for about half an hour, and then of course we can go back to mingling and enjoying all of the lovely food and wine that we've been provided. So I'm going to very briefly introduce our panelists and ask them to tell us what was the most interesting thing that they were working on today, to get a bit of a sense of what they do in their day job. So we have Ravi, the CEO from RIM. Thank you very much for hosting us today. Vincent, the CTO of Red Hat and a board member for OS Climate, and Steve, the CTO for Menicon. So welcome. Thank you very much for being on the panel. Ravi, what was the most interesting thing that you worked on today?
Well, there's this interesting sustainability certification in the real estate industry called GRESB. And I was working with the team today on trying to automate the GRESB certification on our platform. So apparently it's quite the thing with real estate owners, and it's a challenge to kind of figure out how to integrate it into our platform and sell it. So excellent.
That's a real world impact right there. Thank you. Vincent.
So this morning I was actually leading an architecture workshop around building a climate data exchange. So that's part of an OS Climate objective we have this year, to make climate data easily available to people who do research on climate, in particular scientists. And so we have this big lofty goal that we would have this kind of open platform that people would be able to identify suitable data and use it for for the goal of doing climate research, essentially.
Okay, again, so a more academic pursuit, but one that we absolutely need to get better access to that data. Steve, how about you?
Well, my day was very interesting in as much as I was hosting one of our guests from Hong Kong that we're actually trying to preach sustainability to as well. Since every day we're in the automation space and using very high-tech manufacturing to make medical devices. And we're realizing we need to engage more and more with our customers and explain to them what we're doing and how we're doing it. So we were very happy to host a friend. So my interesting part was actually showing her around. So
yeah, great. Well, how about if I stay with you? So you're speaking about automation. I mean, what do you see as some of the key trends in automation at the moment as they relate to sustainability?
For us in our industry, which again has been just to show we're making contact lenses. So in particular here in Singapore, we manufacture daily disposable lenses. So for us, automation means being able to fine tune the amount of materials we use, the raw material consumption we have. It means that we can improve our quality of product without losing out in terms of sustainability. And it means that we can fine-tune the packaging side. So in other words, with the daily disposable lens, you have customers using 2 pairs of lenses every day, 365 days a year. So there's a lot of potential usage of waste, and our system here in our company is to try and drive that wastage down by minimizing the package, utilizing sustainable materials, and then generating the kinds of contact lens consumption that doesn't impact the environment. Okay. But that's one of the things that automation has allowed us to do, because we can generate those materials at minimal levels.
And do you see, is automation increasing rapidly, or it's a fairly constant rate of change?
Automation, I think, is increasing dramatically quickly. It has to be. And with the introduction of systems like Factory 4, we have no choice but to get better and better at automation in terms of, again, speaking from my side in the medical device industry, the cost of compliance, the cost of quality, as you mentioned earlier in the governance area, is getting higher and higher and more invasive into the companies themselves, as will also sustainability. So automation and smart automation is one of the ways to address that and to be able to manufacture very high quality products at a very high repeatable rate, but at the same time, keep your costs down to a level that enables you to be competitive. And it's those two things that I think are always going to be the challenge for any kind of manufacturing company, and particularly in the medical device area.
Yeah, I think regulation and cost are certainly areas that are going to keep coming up. Vincent, from your perspective, where do you see automation
So my perspective is, I'd say, is more technical. So the chance I have is, as a software provider, I get to work with many different industries, in particular in Asia, in the sectors of manufacturing, services, retail, and logistics. I think, IoT is really totally changing the game. I think now the ability to have really cheap sensors and to be able to measure in real time what's happening in your supply chain, manage the efficiency of your supply chain in real time, to me is a big game changer. Because one thing is, we start to look at reporting for sustainability in a different way. It's really about, kind of observing what is really happening and getting the trusted data all the way to, to this better understanding of your operation, which should lead to emissions computation and so on. Yeah, so it's not, oh yeah, I think I'm emitting this. It's, yeah, I can actually back it up. But at the same time, if you think about the need to also not just do sustainability reporting for the sake of it, but really tie this to how it helps you to evolve your business model in terms of gaining efficiency, then to me it's kind of the first step here, right? Before you even talk about becoming more efficient, you need to have a way to observe and measure that you can trust. And from there, you can actually start to optimize your supply chain. So what is very interesting is, a couple of weeks ago, I was in India talking to Tata Motor, and we are working on, integrating all the data across their supply chain. And I mean, it's a kind of CFO-led project, to be honest, right? They're trying to get efficiency, cost reduction. But at the end of the day, sustainability is actually very well aligned with this objective. So that's, to me, one of the biggest, I would say, technology trend that I think is really kind of changing how we actually take the conversation.
And I think that's so important. On the way here, I was reading a Guardian article. I used to work in the seafood sector, and it was talking about monitoring of fish catches in the European Union. And I don't know if any of you know, but when boats are catching fish, it's still all recorded by hand in what's called a captain's log, and that is the legal documentation. And I think we're having all of these discussions on technology and IoT sensors, and it's getting more and more complex, and yet there are still very large global systems which are based on handwritten notes that then travel around the world physically, which just means there's great opportunities there, I think.
Absolutely.
Ravi, how about you, from your perspective?
Well, at RIM, our entire mission was really about using automation to enable sustainability adoption. That the reality is today that there aren't enough participants in the sustainability ecosystem, but sustainability is something that affects all companies, big and small. So the whole idea was to use automation to speed up adoption, to simplify adoption, to demystify some of the complexity around sustainability, KPIs, reporting, analytics, and so on. So really what we try to do is we take a very ecosystem approach, and the idea is to work with companies, large and small, to promote that. So automation is very much at the core of what we do.
So a lot of discussion around automation, I find certainly in Singapore, around the region as well, is focusing on ESG data reporting and really using automation for the reporting function. How do you gather the data, and then how are you going to have the outputs? opportunities do you see for automation and sustainability beyond reporting?
Well, yeah, reporting to us is just really the starting point. The whole idea is once we could get data input into our system, that there's so many things you can do with it. You could get green loans, you could get sustainability certifications, you could be supply chain compliant. There's so many use cases around sustainability that the idea is to go way beyond reporting. Reporting is really viewed through a compliance lens, and that's just the starting point in sustainability. If we want to make a difference, I think we need to create stories, use cases, case studies, where we say this client used our system and they achieved the following results and the following benefits. So that's kind of where we're going more and more, with automation. The idea is if we could sort of have this combination of data management, customization, and so on, we could create many, many positive outcomes for clients around sustainability adoption. That's really our whole ethos, Edward.
So I think that idea of telling stories, we already know on big topics like climate change, for example, it isn't the data that necessarily changes people's outcome. You have to tell the stories to change hearts and minds. So I think there's a bit of both. You need the data on which to make decisions, and you need to be able to tell the stories. Vincent, you mentioned sustainability reporting, when we were on the previous question. Where do you see those trends, and where is automation taking us?
So specifically to the work that I've really been spearheading in open source climate, our focus has been really automation around the data topic. And the trigger for this was when we started to discuss with the climate community, and the focus was more the topic of climate risk. So I work extensively in the domain of a physical climate risk as well as transition risk analysis. And what I gathered initially when I discussed with professionals in this sector was actually our advances in analytics are great, but the data is crap. And we realized that the supply chain of the data is very, very weak, and probably where the automation needs to kind of help and support better data transparency and reliability is really on the data itself. So a lot of the work we've been doing is to really contribute some of the work we've been doing on open source technology to apply it to the data supply chain. And so we have a kind of an open architecture blueprint now to handle climate data that we've been proposing to various organizations across the world who are kind of trying to aggregate data, consume data for whatever climate data or ESG purpose. So we feel it's a very important topic. We probably haven't quite the final solution yet, but we've done a lot of advance in the past 2 years or so to build, I would say, trust around data supply chain. We've come up with a new principle that I call data as code, which is, in essence, for people who do coding or who are developers here, is think about when you build software, you're actually versioning your code so everybody knows whether you are making a change. And this change is being reviewed by a lot of pair of eyes to make sure that your software is a quality. We are applying the exact same principle of software review, but on the data. And so that's a very interesting kind of concept that we have implemented. And now we are seeing a lot of interest from, I mentioned it earlier, community of data science, but as well, honestly, banks, because they rely a lot on this data to take financial decision of investing their money. And data trust is actually very critical to them.
I think trust is absolutely critical to sustainability. I mean, if you don't trust, whether it's your advisors or your data, it's going to be difficult to make progress. And I might come back a little bit more about the difference between an open source approach versus perhaps a more commercial approach. But Steve, maybe if I can go to you. I mean, how are you seeing the sustainability data and these trends? What do you do with the reporting, and how is it helping with reporting data, and how do you go beyond?
Again, I think it comes back to the credibility of the data, but we, in a parallel world, we've been doing something similar in a cloud-based medical reporting structure that we built for exactly that same reason, that about 80% of medical data is dark data. It's taken by handwritten notes by doctors. The patient only gets to experience the relationship with that doctor on periodic visits, and there's no kind of continuity of data gathering between those visits. And so we did the same thing in the cloud base to try and democratize that data and keep it at a more validatable level by having direct access to the equipment that's doing the diagnostics, doing the analysis, etc. And I see the sustainability level being the same thing. It's creating that kind of credibility across the entire chain. And it also, I think, will give us better access to getting proper data from our suppliers within our supply chain as well, which we can't guarantee now because we're getting everything ad hoc from them.
And given how important trust is when it comes to medical devices, do you think automation is helping to build that trust?
Yeah, I think automation can. I think the inputting of the data is still critical, and the mechanisms you use to get that data in and make sure it's valid to get it in first, because if you put it in incorrectly and it's automated, then it stays that way. So yeah. You need to have the checks and balances as you do that. But once you do, it's worth the effort. And then, as we're discussing with the way we're doing our sustainability program, is we make sure that's right first, and then we can validate that, and then reference that going forward. But we find that it's more. I mean, one word is like survival. You have to do it in order for now on the front side of it for our customers to trust us. We say we're doing this, where we have to show that we're doing it. Right now, we will have to go through different separate individual audits for them to be satisfied that this is what we're doing. You know, we're saying what we're doing what we're saying. But if we have an automated system that can be validated and used in a similar manner to the medical device regulatory process, you don't need to do that, because you can just, there's your report, there's your system. And that will, I think, will make that and the whole supply chain a lot more efficient.
So when you started working with RIM, I mean, how did you actually operationalize this? What does it look like on a day-to-day basis? What's different from before you worked with RIM about gathering the data? I mean, if people have never used an automated platform, how is it looking different from your day-to-day operations?
Well, yeah, I mean,
I can see some nodding there, if it's good or bad.
It was. And we started it. I mean, in our aspirations in our company has always been to be environmentally sensitive and responsible. Everybody, it's kind of like, again, if I hark back to the medical device parallel, the sooner you get into it, the better, because you're going to have to do it. Mm-hmm. And if you're going to survive in this world, it's coming. So the quicker you do it, the quicker you get better at it, then the easier it will be as it inevitably gets more and more involved and comprehensive. So we were already starting them. We were already looking at customers that were coming in because they wanted a product that was environmentally friendly, and therefore they wanted to test us. Can we satisfy their requirements? And for a B2B business, which we typically were, we're getting challenged by the B2C. So there was the customers of our business partner that were actually driving that message through to that customer to say to us, are we actually compliant with what they want? So we were doing it by audit. So one of the motivations to get involved with RIM was to do the same as we had successfully done in our cloud-based medical reporting platform, and could we do the same thing? And that's where we started sitting down. We engaged with the team here, and it's a very, very close relationship to begin with, to get this first customized system in the way we want it to suit our business. And then from there, the automation can take over. So it's like anything you do, you've got to put the hard work in first, get it done, and then it becomes easier and easier.
So you're here at a RIM event. So obviously the partnership is going well. You're still speaking to each other. That's got to be a good thing.
Of course it is. No, yeah. So I'm a big advocate of it. I think it's like I said, it's survival. You, as a business, if you want to survive and grow in the coming decade, we must embrace this.
So Vincent, we were speaking earlier before this session of you're doing a lot of travel, going to see a lot of potential clients, a lot of discussion on how you can use automation. Can you give us any examples of some projects that you've worked on where they really are using automation for live sustainability impact, so to speak, or integrating automated data into strategies?
Well, so I think, again, back to my earlier comment, I think especially in the space of, say, manufacturing, a lot of the investment is not kind of sustainability specific. It's really about looking at business models that have a lot of built-in efficiency in the supply chain, using the business data in real time to actually understand better how to plan, how to allocate resources to a business, how to manage stock more efficiently. I've got a lot of examples, but I mean, maybe I'll mention a few. We are working in this project called Catena X, is actually the automotive industry. And we are basically building a platform with all the supply chain to actually share the production data in real time. So as you can imagine, that leads to a lot of efficiency in supply chain, logistics, and so on. And I mentioned this one as well because of your earlier comment on open source. Open source is a way to actually build technology solution to common problems that the world face. It doesn't preclude commercial competition between the provider. So projects like Catena X is a good example. You'll have Toyota with General Motors working together on a common standard to exchange data about the supply chain with their suppliers. They are not trying to compete on their own standard. It doesn't make any sense. The faster they actually implement a common standard to exchange the data, the faster the industry as a whole is able to use this data efficiently to get better. Efficiency, sustainability, cost. I mean, you name a lot of benefits potentially. But what I think is important here is collectively we get a lot better at those things when we share some of the solution aspects which are not competitive in nature. So a provider like RIM, which is a commercial provider of solution, can actually use open source technology at the back to build them faster and to deliver more value to their customer. So that's kind of the whole, I would say it's the entire business model of Red Hat, but for us we thrive on. It's not the usual commercial model of software provider, to be honest. Even my own family still doesn't understand why I spend my time writing code and putting it on repository for free and I still make money. But this is what we do. And the reason we do it is because we feel the world as a whole progress faster with joint innovation.
What's your take on the open source and the approach that OS Climate is taking?
No, I think what Vincent is saying makes a lot of sense. I mean, if you take our space, there's so many ESG tech companies these days, and they're all very skilled at certain things, right? Like carbon calculation or reporting or supply chain ratings and so on. But in reality, one needs to, as a large organization, right, like Steve's, you need to take a very holistic approach because they need all those things. So if we could use open source, where we could collaborate together and have APIs that plug into what we do, which we're starting to do more and more. There are others who do certain things better than us, and we should acknowledge that and work with them and use that. It's a win-win. So I agree completely with Vincent. I think it makes a lot of sense to collaborate. And the ultimate expression of that probably is the directory model, right? I think he was referring to that in automotive, where we've talked about that. We haven't actually actualized it in practice, but to have a common set of data that's vetted by multiple people, provided by multiple people through automation, that allows people in a supply chain, companies in a supply chain to make sensible decisions, around sustainability aspects, is really, where to go. So, no, I think it makes a lot of sense.
Let me ask you, you touched on the fact that there's actually a lot of ESG data platforms out there now. I'm sure since you started RIM, you've seen the explosion in the number of them. How would someone perhaps make a judgment between which platform provider they would be going with? What are some of the quality aspects that you're looking at?
Well, I mean, it really varies on, the kind of client you're talking to and what they want. The reality is a lot of people don't have very holistic sorts of views on ESG. They take this very siloed view. They just want to calculate their emissions, or, they want, I don't know, a report or something like that, right? So when you sell sort of a full stack solution like we do with customizability, it often, sometimes, it falls on deaf ears, right? So that's the reality. So the problem with sustainability is it means very different things to very different people today. It's a very young industry that's evolving. So one cannot say they're right or wrong. You know, it's just where they are in their journey. So we tried to have something, you know, for everyone, but well, you know, it's difficult. You know, that's just kind of that's kind of where we are. So yeah, it's hard to say. It really depends on the day and the client and the discussion. Yeah.
Maybe I'll ask a client then. What were you looking for when you decided to go down this automation path for sustainability?
Okay, from our point of view, again, it was looking at something that could cover our entire supply chain. Not so much because we were getting inquiries from customers that want this. I mean, we started looking very seriously about being sustainable, about being environmentally responsible many, many years ago. The key for us was, and for everyone, I personally think, is that we're not starting this from day one. Everybody's trying to now come into sustainability from the middle of their business, and you have a lot of legacy issues which are prohibiting or making it very difficult for people to go backwards as well as they go forward, because they've got to cover what's come on before them. And so we felt having a cloud system and an automated system that could allow us to tune our sustainability objectives, both upstream and downstream, would give us the most flexibility. And we sat down, we realized that you're not going to cover 100% in the first go, but at least it was a path to get there. And again, because in the medical industry, it's really important for us because we are controlled by two parts of this. One is the sustainability obligations, which are now emerging and coming and will get stronger and more mature. And the other is on the medical device and the regulatory pathways costs us a huge amount of time. So if we want to change something within our supply chain or within our manufacturing structures, it costs us a huge amount of upstream time before we can get back onto the market because we'll have to satisfy certain regulatory obligations. That's going to be true also of sustainability. And sustainability will influence medical regulatory pathways as will regulatory pathways influence sustainability. So we felt that getting a flexible system that we could sort of pretty much predict in a way what we would want to do going forward that would still comply with our policies would give us that ability to kind of parallel them as we go along. Because if we lose one to the other, we could be off the market for a particular product, for example, for typically 4 to 5 years.
Yeah, when we were talking before the panel, you were saying about a change in the EU regulations.
Correct, the PFAS, yeah. So
maybe just explain briefly, you know, what we discussed about that change of regulation and how long and how impactful that could be along your supply chain.
Well, that's one of the examples of this is that, again, is this the essence of sustainability or the reporting thereof is coming in the middle of most companies already making devices, already having established practices, established products, and more importantly, established raw materials that they've been using in the environment and with their customers for many, many, many years. Suddenly now, well, not suddenly, but now they're getting to the point where, particularly in the EU, they're discovered as these are not desirable components. So maybe there's a part of a multiple, very complex medical device that you're manufacturing, and in our instance, it's a contact lens. It's a tiny part of the raw material, but it's been used very successfully, compliant with all medical device regulations for 10, 20 years. Now, suddenly it's not considered to be appropriate to put in the material. So unless we find a way to address that particular ingredient, that product and the entire family of products has to come off the market. And there is no replacement for that product right now. And so the people who are actually getting medically treated very successfully will have to find something else, or find an alternate methodology, even if there is one, which right now there's not. So those sorts of things, I think, have a very big impact on businesses, and having some kind of predictability, being able to kind of have a bit of a crystal ball going forward in the future, using, like we talked about before, in ChatGPT and things like that. I think that kind of data is going to be essential to companies making these kind of decisions, because, you know, they become a hard stop if we can't deal with them. And that's, as I said, that's one thing we're going through right now.
So you mentioned ChatGPT, you know, the fastest growing user platform that the world has seen. AI, obviously, it's not new, but it hasn't necessarily been integrated into the use of sustainability, data and automation. Vincent, maybe I'll turn to you. What do you see as the opportunities with AI like ChatGPT, and where will it drive this automation of ESG?
Right, so ChatGPT, to me, what's important is this is what we call a foundation model. So what it means is it's a model trained for language. By itself, it doesn't do anything super useful except feeding Twitter with, with anecdotes and that type of stuff.
That's what we all need.
Yeah,
More
that's
feeds
what
on
we all
Twitter.
need to feed all day when we are going to the office. But beyond this, it means that when you need to train some form of AI process that needs language as a support, you can do this a lot faster, because now you can take this foundation model, which is pre-trained, with extensive amount of data, and then you can just add the part that you need this model to do. So an example is, if you are a business and you want to train some automated bot to do customer service, now guess what? You only need to teach this bot about your business and your industry model. The language training has already been done. Now for my industry, this is a big thing, because first, training this type of complex model end-to-end not only takes time, it takes very expensive resources who are data scientists, who are hard to find, but also it takes an extremely high amount of resources, talking compute. The savings we have in terms of computation, they are actually an improvement in sustainability, because guess what? Digital carbon is also a very, very big producer of carbon. It's not only a big producer, it's a producer that keeps growing. And it's one of the only industries that, unfortunately, right now the pathway is not reducing at all. So that's the advantage of ChatGPT is now we can quickly take a foundation like this and embed it into greater automation capability. Now let me share with you one example where we use this in sustainability specifically. For ESG disclosure, we have actually started to automate the assurance of disclosure. So what do? When we get automated disclosure from a company, we actually have a language model that will screen CSR report, news. Last time your CEO went on the radio, talked about his emission. We are able to match what is disclosed versus what is actually on the market. We are able to actually find the kind of your competitor within the industry who should have similar footprint and kind of compare. Now, why is this helpful? Because we can embed automated assurance in the process of checking the data. Now, this is the part that takes a lot of human resources, the assurance, because getting some data or Excel spreadsheet
back to the
be
whole
processed,
topic of trust.
very, very easy, right? The tech is not new. But ensuring that the data is good, like really a lot of pair of hands and eyes is actually now going through trying to kind of match and compare. So we see here as a big opportunity the access to this technology, especially in handling unstructured data and being able to kind of match and provide some better level of assurance on disclosure. We think it's a big opportunity. Yeah.
Ravi, what are you seeing with AI and the likes of ChatGPT?
Yeah, AI is very, very important to us at RIM. We use it in different ways. First and foremost, companies struggle to answer questions around ESG. So we use AI predictive tools. We have a database of 12,500 companies. So we can estimate scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 emissions, and a few other key difficult to calculate metrics. And often that works better than self-reported data. So that's one way we use AI. ChatGPT we use to improve reporting quality. So a lot of our reports are built off of self-assessments, but often the answers are cursory, and incomplete. So ChatGPT can help fill in the blanks there and create richer reports. So we use it, we use it for that. We use AI to scrape data. So we have NLP tools that scrape public language, English language, publicly available sustainability reports. So, we build a bigger data set. So yeah, AI is very much at the core of almost every aspect of our platform, yeah.
So we'll pick up on one thing you said, that it's scraping English language. I mean, obviously, if you're going to medical devices and most products around the world and services, you need multiple languages. I mean, how is AI going to help with looking at the different languages and the different needs from that perspective?
Yeah, we haven't cracked the code on that yet. We'd like to do it in Japanese or Chinese. But to be honest, I'm not entirely sure how we do that. It's probably a research project, yeah. But I believe there are about 50,000 English language sustainability reports. So, and you know, many foreign companies also report in English. So you do get, you know, Chinese and Japanese companies on our database, but we can't capture all the local language information.
Okay, so we're seeing AI and automation, certainly in ESG, mainly in English language then. If you're saying many...
Well, at least at RIM, you know, that's what we do. Maybe there are Japanese or Chinese companies doing it in their own language. I don't know, to be honest. Yeah, English is not a bad place to start because it's the most common, you know, language for reporting, for sure.
Just on that particular question, because I'm interested, what are you seeing on the different languages?
Well, I'm definitely not an expert on Oriental, but you know, I don't think we had any issue doing NLP on most kind of Western language that are based on the, you know, the Roman alphabet, essentially. They're all pretty trainable because there's a lot of source of data out there that we can use them with. I think the problem comes when typically the language structure itself is based on a different kind of mental model. And, you know, I haven't really reached the point where we're trying to process Chinese document. But I guess if we come to that point, I would probably be looking at, you know, getting some of the Chinese tech company engaged, because I'm pretty sure they're like kind of far ahead. You know, people like Ali or Tencent, I mean, they are partner of mine. I mean, we do a fair bit of work on their cloud in China. They have their own, you know, huge teams of data scientists as well. I'm pretty sure that they would probably have very advanced capability in terms of NLP for Chinese language. Yeah.
That makes sense. Steve, in your line of work, how has ChatGPT had an impact, or how are you using AI?
ChatGPT itself, we hasn't had much of an impact on our business right now. And still, again, in our particular world, even though we cross over different countries, and we would welcome using different, you know, having a universal language or a Babelfish for our sustainability reporting, which is one of the reasons why we're doing what we're doing. We're mainly using AI, as I said, in setting up cloud-based systems, predictive models for analysis of eye diseases, for example. So one of the areas we have a pathology tree using a Bayesian engine where we can model over diagnostic of certain eye elements of an eye, for example. We can do about 250 million different signs and symptoms of particular eye disease and then predict what that patient may or may not have. So for us, it's been very medically driven, but I think it will get further and further down through the system.
Now that makes sense. I mean, we've been talking about automation of sustainability, data and processes in the very positive, all the things it can do. What do you think are some of the limitations, and what is obvious that we can't do at the moment? And Steve, I'll stay with you for that question first.
In that area, I think it's adoption of a universal system throughout your entire supply chain can be difficult. If those suppliers you're using are not adept to using automation properly, as Ravi said, that they have to fill in the gaps on some things because of the inability to fill in data correctly or sufficiently. So my view is automation is good, and it will eventually be a lot more universal, but the adoption of certain areas of it is still coming up to speed. And that again goes back to your model of the fishermen seeing notes of what fish they're catching. I mean, you can't put automation into that just yet, or it'll be very difficult. So I think in those areas we still deal with a legacy-based system, and it's not starting from zero, then everybody gets on the same page and all goes off and does exactly the same thing. And I think that will be a problem, or can be a problem. And I think also a non-universal system, as Vince was saying, if you have an open source platform, it may allow better universal or more universal adoption of systems which will then relate. If they don't, and we go the VHS beta route, then you're going to end up with siloed data, which isn't going to help.
So building on that, Vincent, what are you seeing as some of the limitations and challenges of automation in sustainability?
All right, so for me, one key challenge is if you look at the hardware level, the concept of interoperability is still very, very far. Even if we take a very simple example like the silicon, right? So the kind of CPU, GPU, and so on. in the space of devices, we see a lot of providers who have really different interfaces that needs to be consumed. So a lot of the time we spend typically with customer kind of wiring their supply chain and trying to make it intelligent. Actually, a lot of it is spent with the device provider just trying to create the compatibility around the data consumption. So, I mean, it's a very inefficient model, right? Because you have to deal with this constant intake of new standards and kind of just trying to operate all this technology together. And a lot of time we have to go back maybe, to factory technology that could be 15, 20 years old. So you may have also to integrate different generation of this technology together to actually make sense of the entire supply chain of a customer. So that's a big limitation of automation, right? Because again, automation can only happen if you can get all the data into a kind of understood common universe. And that process of creating this interoperability for data is still very, very complex. So that's one thing. The second thing I mentioned very quickly is the kind of next generation of automation, which is built on AI. The big risk that we have is really that the inputs we give to the AI model, they can be extremely biased or limited. We just have historical data. So you will see obviously a lot of research happening on explainable AI and ethical AI. And I don't think there is a very simple answer to this, because the reality is when you can only train the model based on historical bias data, you can kind of detect that it's biased, but then what do you do? So that's another problem that we see, because, again, when you're actually kind of processing like reports and unstructured data, like a lot of this information, it can be kind of technically correct, but not ethically correct. So what do you do with this, right? So that part, honestly, I don't think there's an answer, but it's just that this is a potential big limitation, depending on your use case, that you have to really bear in mind with the use of AI, right? So ChatGPT is all good, but I mean, at the end of the day, it's an extremely biased system, as you can see if very well documented by the community. You can easily get pretty shocking response from that type of model. Yeah.
So you have to be aware of those limitations before you go into using the systems.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, Ravi, what do you see?
Yeah, I want to pick up on Vincent's point. It's very interesting. We use AI primarily to process data and build analytics around it. But to Vincent's point, a lot of the sustainability data today is self-reported. So at the end of the day, we really may not, even though we use AI, to process data and analyze data and try to make sense of the data, we may not really be drawing the right conclusions, right? Or the most accurate conclusions, I think it's okay. That's the reality of where we are, in sustainability today, that it's still very early days in terms of building common standards and assurance practices around data. Many companies don't even report data. So you're grateful for what you can get. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, the way we apply our AI may not necessarily lead to the best conclusions and recommendations, for clients. We have to acknowledge that.
Yeah, and that again comes back to this issue of trust, and if you can trust the data and if you're getting the right information. Now I'll ask our panelists one final question, and then I'm going to open it up to the floor, and to those who are online, I will get some questions coming in on my phone. So start thinking of all of your questions. For you guys here, one last question, maybe in one sentence, and I'll start with you, Ravi. Where do you see us heading in the next couple of years on this topic of sustainability and automation?
Oh, I think it will become a huge subject, right? So we've always said at RIM, sustainability is a very, very important business process and function. The reality today is most large enterprises and certainly small enterprises don't have the capability within their organizations. They're going to have to build it like they did with other business functions. Automation will play a key role, and we have no doubt that sustainability will get more and more integrated, into organizations, and automation will play a very central role, in sharing information with the organization, acting on that information, building applications and solutions. So I have no doubt that we're in like sort of the very early days of automation and sustainability, and it will become more mainstream over the next few years.
Thank you. Vincent, where do you see us headed?
Well, so we haven't really discussed this topic that much today, but I think the key trend for me in the short term is really greater standardization of taxonomies. And one aspect I'm actually kind of working on now in Singapore specifically is the subject of taxonomy equivalence. So I think this is going to help a lot,
You're talking the sustainable finance taxonomies?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So that to me is probably one of the pretty supporting process, because the moment we have a better understanding of difference in taxonomy and equivalence, again, we're kind of creating a better understanding and repository of the data we have, just become easier to, to kind of progress from there once we speak the same language.
Yes, that's one of the things that always strikes me on the taxonomy is that we want a common language, but we've all created a whole different set of languages for each
Everybody wants to be the one language that will rule them all, right? So
That's it.
So that's the discussion I always have.
It's a challenge. Steve,
Yeah.
final word for you.
My view is that sustainability will and must become prospective rather than remedial. Everyone today has basically businesses do something wrong, they get fined, and then they try and fix it. But I think it has to be built into the system ultimately. And the millennials and the consumers will drive that despite political wins. And I think it will become prospective. It'll become part and parcel of what you do.
I think that's a great word to finish on. Thank you. Now I'm going to open up to the audience. I've got a question that's come in from online, so thank you. What kinds of processes in business operations or job functions in the field of sustainability will be replaced by automation? Ravi, maybe I'll start with you. Have you got any thoughts on that?
Job functions?
Yep. Business operations or job functions in the field of sustainability that may be replaced by automation.
Well, I'm not sure about that. The way I look at it is people and technology can go together in this field. The reality is most companies don't have any, sort of sustainability team.
Right, so they're not being replaced, they're still being created.
Yeah, I mean, so I think, it'll probably go that way eventually, but...
You've got to get there to have them replaced. In the
I don't think we're quite there yet. So I'd say that there's plenty of scope to build, teams around this and use technology as part of that. So I would say for now, they're probably friends.
Okay, low risk.
And foes.
Low risk from your perspective. Vincent, what are you seeing?
Well, I mean, over time, I just think we'll see an evolution, right? My experience has been, again, in the kind of the corporate space, a lot of the time the people who are appointed to take care of sustainability is like, how do I report something? How do I give the figure to the CEO for the, for the official disclosure? The focus is very much kind of tick the box, get the things out there. I mean, I think that part is for sure going to be automated at some point. Yeah, but the part that will never be automated is kind of embedding sustainable practice in a business. But I think what you will see there is almost what I've seen in terms of trend with data and chief data officer. Is that initially we created chief data officer to just, hey, you are this guy just kind of owning the data. And now what we see is, well, actually the entire business now is powered with data. So now you're actually the one pretty much creating business revenue, strategy, embedding analytics into business and whatnot. I think sustainability is going to be the same movement. I literally see kind of function driving the use of sustainability and efficiency into business strategy. And over time, this will even be a de facto capability that any corporate CEO has. Otherwise, you just can't run a business. I mean, I'm really, really convinced of this.
Okay, so I better look for another job as a chief sustainability officer. My future might be limited.
Potentially.
No, I actually think you have to have it. I think I agree with you, but I do think the variability of every individual business, as to Ravi's point, that if you're serious about what you're trying to do, automation will simply help you get the data, help you manage it, help you make it work for you, but it's not going to allow you to modify the way it works for individual companies or individual modalities. And I think that's always going to be necessary. So I don't see it replacing, but I just think at this point, in all automation, we went through the manual cycle and then we gradually went to semi-automation, then automation to get rid of variability within the processes. You sort of sort of ticked your staff into higher levels of competency and qualifications in the process. I think the same will happen with this. It's just that we're starting now. So there is no real sort of parallel or contrast that we can use yet.
Thank you. Got another one from our very active audience online. We'll go to that. For many SMEs, technology is a way for them to implement sustainability, but it could be hard to implement due to financial and logistical constraints. How can we better convince or remove the barriers for smaller companies to utilise technology to optimise their operations? Steve?
That's exactly what we're doing now. We're trying to do the same thing because it is a barrier, and if you get the sense that you have to introduce a whole department that's going to do this with all the normal hierarchy and organisation behind it, it will be too costly. And every time we add costs, then obviously companies become less and less competitive. So I think having an automated system, having an ability to get your data under control relatively easily actually will be the opposite. I think it will help. That's one of the reasons why we're doing it ourselves.
Vincent?
Well, I think to me, part of the answer here is actually the model and potentially the regulatory support. I mean, you are from EMEA, so I'm not literally explaining anything to you.
I'm not your regulator anymore.
But you see, to me, it's interesting because I work with kind of multiple countries around the globe. And you see, in Singapore, we really have a regulator who thought very early on that having some kind of a digital blueprint for sustainability infrastructure that is shared is very critical. And to me, it makes a lot of sense because ultimately, if you want all these small businesses to be able to kind of, plug themselves into the disclosure and sharing the data with financial institutions and so on, you need to have this very efficient kind of public utility model that will support this to be done in a standardized way at a low cost. Otherwise, you'll only have the Fortune 500 are able to have this very fancy system capability to do everything. But then the bulk of the business and activity and economic activity that still need to transition, actually, we don't even know what's happening because they are too poor to report. So I think to me, really part of the solution is to have a supportive environment, especially regulatory, to actually help the economy as a whole to kind of get on the train.
I saw the announcement this week that Bursa Malaysia is going down an automated ESG reporting system, and it's got a specific function on greening the value chain, so how to bring all of the smaller enterprises along. Ravi, what's your perspective on that?
Well, at RIM, we take SME sustainability adoption very seriously. So we try to use automation to bring down price points and simplify, sustainability adoption. So that's at the core of what we do. It's a product we call My CSO Essential, which costs just $1,000 a year. So at that price point, we'd like to think that a lot of SMEs could use our platform. So that's number one. But number two, Vincent's also right that governments, regulators also need to subsidize or encourage, use cases. So I'll give you one example at RIM. We worked with TÜV SÜD, the German testing certification company, to automate ISO certifications for sustainability around 14 standards. And Enterprise Singapore actually subsidized 300 SMEs in Singapore to use the system, to first use the system, get a rating, and then work on a certification. Which was viewed as a very tangible benefit, right, for an SME. Show you're ISO certified around a certain standard, as Steve was referring to. So, in Singapore that can work because the public utility model works well here. It's not the case everywhere, but regulators and governments also, have a role to play in that. I agree.
Okay, so this is a question for Vincent. How does Red Hat's decisions on technology transformation, innovation and R&D and product development focus on solving big societal challenges relevant to your industry?
Oh wow, I'm really scared when I hear
Yeah,
big societal
that's a
challenges,
big question.
because whatever look, it's not just it. I won't say it's big societal changes, right? Just if I were to summarize a bit our approach is there are really two very distinct aspects, right? Is first as a business, we need to look at our own approach to sustainability and what it means. Part of my role as a chief technology officer is, I don't get to sell anything. I don't have sales target, or I'm just here to understand technology strategy. And a lot of the work I've been doing over the past 2 years or so is how do we build a technology strategy for products that helps our customer manage better the utilization of technology resources, fundamentally. And so we're trying to make use of, obviously, better development practices to develop software. We're trying to build better observability. And we are trying to use technologies such as artificial intelligence to help businesses automatically adjust how they actually use IT resources. Yeah, because we live in a world where, unfortunately, using a lot of IT resources has become very easy. And so we have a lot of waste. So we're trying to deal with this as a business. Now, in addition to this, and this is more related to my open source climate engagement, we are also looking at how we can use our own skill set as tech guys. I mean, I'm not a climate data scientist. I'm not going to solve issue about, making the climate better or helping industry, become better at what they do. That's not my skill set. The one thing I realize is there is a big gap in technical skill set on digital infrastructure for climate and ESG. And I see this, I've been in the COP for the past 2 years, and I've spoken with a lot of organizations, World Economic Forum, United Nations. The constant thing that I see is millions of dollars get spent on technology for very, very little deliverable. And that really worried me. So when we started to get engaged in OS Climate, the idea was, hey, we have pretty good software developer, technologies architect who have this skill set that we can really help people build very efficient digital infrastructure very quickly, very cost competitive. Can we use our own skill set as citizens to contribute this to the topic of climate and ESG? So this is my way, and the way of the Redditors who are with me in the project, and obviously other contributors as well. AWS is also a contributor, and so on. We are contributing as technologists our time, our knowledge, to help people in the sector of climate and ESG use technology better to solve climate problems. Running climate risk model, running transition. We've discussed with, literally a number of African governments who don't have access to technology to build transition model. And we told them, hey, we can actually run this for you on cloud infrastructure. We'll help you provide the technology for free so you can really assess your long-term economic strategy and in terms of how you get your industry to become greener and cleaner. Right now, what they are missing is the infrastructure, the kind of compute power to do this. This we can provide. So that's just an example. We are not going to solve all the major problems of the world, but in our own capacity and using our own, knowledge, we're kind of trying to see how we can also contribute just outside of just Red Hat, classic remit and business.
Yeah, that does seem like you're attempting to solve some of those big global challenges. Steve, have you got anything that you'd like to add from your perspective?
From say the business and the type of business that I'm working in, one of the key issues that we have is until there is a standardization, or until there is a number of metrics which we know, and to Karen's point, that we can compare with ourselves, it's very, very hard to know what to do other than you trying to do your best when the policies of your companies. For example, if we're making a product, you have the actual product development pipeline, the time frame. And right now, we're talking about in the now, but when we want to develop a product, it goes through its R&D stage. We can be doing part of the development in multiple different countries, multiple languages, multiple origins to go into a country somewhere else around the world, but we know what it has to look like, what it has to comply with, because those standards exist. And so we can work on that and we say, you know, in 5 years' time, that product's ready, it's passed all the clinical studies, it's passed all the compliance regulatory process, and now it can go into that market. But with sustainability, you don't know that yet. So we're still trying to guess what will be the requirements by the time you get that product. So even now, when we're doing R&D and product development, you're looking at it, well, what is the requirement going to be in 3 years' time, 4 years' time, 5 years' time? And will we be compliant by that time, or do we have to scrap everything and start again? And nobody knows that. So I think the advent of the faster we can get automated, the faster we can use predictive tools that will allow us to at least collectively make some reasonable judgment that that's what's going to be required by that stage. Then we can sort of invest the money, invest the time, invest the resources to actually go down that product pipeline pathway.
That makes sense. Ravi, have you got a perspective on this?
Yeah, I think the market is shifting, you know, in sustainability from disclosure to implementation, because there's a disconnect, you know, between stated goals and, you know, the reality of where the world is on climate change or social inequality, you know, and other ESG, you know, types of metrics. So I think where technology could help that transition from disclosure to implementation for companies really, you know, is the next big thing in sustainability. So transition risk models, for example, you know, are super important. How are you doing versus baseline standards, right? How do you actually then meet those standards over time? And you know, what does it take from an investment point of view, from, you know, a company engagement point of view, right? So yeah, I think that's the next big thing, right? Is ultimately, why are we all doing this? You know, we're doing this because we want to create a more sustainable world. And you know, right now, we're not at that stage. You know, we're still measuring, disclosing, trying to figure it out. But I think the transition to implementation is the next big thing.
And I think having that North Star of why are we actually doing all of this is important. Sometimes we get lost in the weeds of it's about the data, it's about the reporting, but why are we doing all of this?
Yeah.
And it is for a more sustainable world. We've had a sneaky last question come in. This is definitely the last question about greenwashing and climate litigation. I mean, can you think of an example of where there's been some recent scrutiny of a company and where maybe the use of automation and the ESG data would have actually prevented where it came to the accusations of greenwashing?
Not in our industry, no.
Yeah.
Luckily.
Good to know. You're off the hook.
Yeah, I could address that. Well, greenwashing is now a crime in many jurisdictions. So, you know, for the first time, I think regulators are taking greenwashing quite seriously. There are no automated tools today to detect greenwashing, particularly amongst fund managers, but at RIM, we're developing one. So we're developing a greenwashing index that looks at fund manager prospectus disclosures versus actual performance. So we're seeing gaps in what they say they do in terms of ESG practices versus what they're doing. And that's a very interesting tool to sell to regulators because it's a way of enforcing financial crime. We're also looking at corporate greenwashing by using alt data sources like Glassdoor employer ratings, you know, CDP environmental ratings, SPT ratings, and things like that, versus self-disclosed data and how they think they're performing, right? So, you know, you could use a lot of automation and tech to detect greenwashing. We're working on some of those because we see a demand from clients, especially in the financial community and the regulatory community. So it's early days, but yeah, this is a hot button issue.
Yeah, and those are great examples. I mean, Vincent, I think you mentioned about assurance and data assurance.
Yeah. So, I mean, I won't mention specific names, but we've been working on really a way to, I would say, to automate assurance by literally federating different data sources and trying to kind of tie them together. So one example of this is you've got reported emission. You could actually have sensor data, and you could also have satellite imaging data. And you kind of try to start to correlate them. Definitely satellite imaging can actually help you measure carbon concentration. So that's pretty interesting to know, and it's scientific. And so if you have some, say, lone factory in some part of, maybe China and so on, and the reporting doesn't quite tie with the observed carbon concentration, then you can actually start to maybe to raise some concern and some alarm. So, obviously my approach is kind of always based on engineer mindset, right? I'm trying to find how can I kind of question a reported data with an actual fact that I can measure. I think to me that's where the solution really lies in the long term. Interestingly, I was actually discussing with someone who's built a kind of an open source and citizen project, which is basically an IoT device that is totally open source, which you as a citizen, you can buy. I think it costs $40. The device is self-powered by solar power. It has like a radio network access, and it actually measures the air quality and report it to an open data project. So apparently they started to build this project in Japan because people kind of thought that the government is probably not saying exactly like the right air quality, especially after the Fukushima disaster. And so they had a kind of a citizen approach to questioning the data quality, which is, hey, we are going to provide all the citizens with very cheap device that you can put on your window. And then if you have enough people around the zone to kind of have, come with all these data measure, you can start making maybe a better picture than the officially reported. And so I thought it was an interesting project because first there's an element of making observation very affordable. But if you think about it, it's also the perfect system to have assurance because it's fully distributed. The moment you actually put the device on your window and you have 500 other people putting it at their window in the same city, who can actually
Very
fudge
hard to
the data?
greenwash when you've got that many data points.
Exactly. So at that time I was working on DLT, and I was I was thinking it's almost like a human DLT equivalent. But now you have 500 parallel measures, which kind of all be challenged to each other, and you kind of be the quorum of the observed data. I mean, I just felt it was like a brilliant way to actually go about, getting assurance on observability. And again, it's powered by technology at heart, right?
I think that's a great example to end on.